Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, I guess. Um, Thanks for joining us today. This is our usual Monday live stream. And we were talking about working with multiple dogs the last couple times that we broadcast. And I'll get back to that in a couple of weeks. But because our reactive dog online reactive dog course, the reactive dog survival guide, is open just for this week for enrollment, I decided to do kind of a special Q&A session today on your top reactive dog training questions. I solicited questions in our free Facebook support group, and thank you to those of you who answered. That was really helpful. I've prepared answers to some of these in advance, but you can also submit questions. Just comment under the live video wherever you're watching this. And if I can get to them, I'll answer as many as I can today. All right. And if you can hear me, please give me a thumbs up or a comment just so I know my audio is working correctly. It shows that it is, but I've just made that mistake too many times at this point. All right. What your top? Oops, sorry about that. I need to move this window a little bit. I'll get this right. All right. That should be right. Okay. Top reactive dog training questions. So some of these, those of you in the group submitted, and I really appreciated it. For the most part, a lot of these are quick answers, but there is one that was a bit more involved. So I'm going to spend a little time talking about this. I really like this question. Does it matter whether your dog, the question was, I think, does it matter whether your dog is frustrated or fearful of the trigger when you're training a reactive dog? So does the why matter? Does it matter why your dog is behaving this way? And we actually spend the first lesson of the Reactive Dog Survival Guide course helping you work this out with about your dog. Why is your dog doing this? Because it does matter, and I hope I can convince you with a little more information here. So the question, we could reframe it as, does the dog want or not want the trigger? So for instance, if your dog is reactive to other dogs, is the reinforcer for that reactive behavior that sometimes they get to go see dogs, so they love dogs and want to go see them? Or is it that they're a little bit afraid of other dogs and they want them to go away? Or, just to complicate things for us, could it be both? Some of you may have seen dogs who seem to want to check out other dogs, but are also kind of nervous around them. So that just complicates life for us a little more. So does my dog want or not want the trigger, or both? And does that matter for my training? So this may be familiar to some of you who have watched other of our videos before. When we're trying to change problem behavior, we have some different areas that we can work with, places we can intervene to try to decrease the behavior we don't like and increase stuff that we like better. And these are motivation to do the behavior, opportunity. So when can the dog do the behavior to get the reinforcer? And then what is the reinforcer? With reactive dogs, when we're asking, does it matter why they're doing this? Does it matter if they like or don't like the trigger, for instance, want to get to or want to get away from the trigger? We're really asking about differences in motivation and maintaining consequence or reinforcer, and how does that affect our training? So I'll try to make this a little clearer in a second. But before I dig too far into this, I wanted to make sure that you all know that this isn't a dichotomy where your reactive dog either wants or doesn't want the trigger, and so the reinforcer for your dog's reactive behavior is getting to or getting away from the trigger. There are actually lots of potential reinforcers for reactive behavior, and this will be, individual to your dog. So some examples of potential reinforcers that I've seen in action with reactive dogs. One is access to other dogs and playing with other dogs. So think the dog that, pulls and barks their way to the daycare building, or the same to the dog park. their reactive behavior has resulted at least sometimes in getting to go play with other dogs. So this could be a reinforcer for that lunging and barking that we don't love. If you have a dog who loves being petted, touched, or picked up, like a small dog who likes being picked up, and you do those things after they react, after they bark and lunge, this can become a reinforcer for that behavior as well, for barking and lunging. If you're frequently working in a context where your dog is reacting a lot, and then after they react, you're cueing another behavior and feeding them, giving them treats, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, inadvertently reinforcing behavior we don't want, then food may have become a reinforcer for reactive behavior. And meeting people is another one. We've had some recent client dogs who, leap into the air, bark, lunge, get really excited when they see people. And occasionally they've been able to actually reach a person and say hi following that behavior. And so we suspect that that may have reinforced that behavior. So those are all things that a dog could gain from reactive behavior that could be driving it, could be reinforcing it. But how about avoiding stuff? So dogs can also, or any of us, can also have behaviors reinforced if they help us avoid things that we don't like. So if your dog does happen to find other dogs aversive, unpleasant, wants them to go away, then that could be a reinforcer for your dog's reactive behavior. Because when you're out on a walk, your dog barks and lunges, the person across the street walking their dog is probably going to keep moving. So from your dog's point of view, they barked, the other dog moved away. So that's one potential reinforcer, escaping or getting distance from another dog. Getting distance from people, reaching toward or approaching them. Most people have the good sense to stop reaching toward a dog and back away if the dog, lunges or growls at them. So that can be a pretty effective reinforcer of lunging and growling. And then those of you who have dogs who are reactive to vehicles, anything on wheels, really, skateboards, bikes, cars, those too tend to keep moving away after your dog barks or lunges at them. So this could be another reinforcer. So I wanted just to make sure that it was clear that it's not like there are just two options for reinforcers of reactive behavior. Either they want to get to the trigger or get away from the trigger. Those could definitely be, and they may be the main reinforcers, but there are also other things that we do, like attention and feeding, that can add to the reinforcement for this behavior. So it depends on your dog. And this is something, again, that we have you work through with a worksheet in the Reactive Dog Survival Guide so that you can start to identify and develop a working hypothesis about why your dog is behaving this way. Because as you can see, or you'll see in a second, it does affect how you approach the problem. All right, so back to our changing problem behavior. I'm going to work through an example, or a hypothetical example, two examples, I guess, technically. A dog who is afraid of other dogs and a dog who likes other dogs. So two different reactive dogs, one who has been reinforced in the past for reactive behavior by getting to and playing with dogs. The other dog has been their reactive behavior has been reinforced by getting distance from dogs. So these are totally hypothetical, which makes it easy to say these are the reinforcers. All right, so if the reinforcer is dog access, and this isn't always play for all dogs. I mean, some dogs love to play, and that may be a huge reinforcer for them, but some dogs also will find it quite reinforcing just to sniff another dog, check them out, and then walk away. So it's good to know that just because your dog doesn't play a lot doesn't mean that dog access isn't a reinforcer. Okay, so if you were going to manipulate consequences, remember these are our three places we can change things, change the environment to hopefully decrease problem behavior. One thing you could do is say, okay, when my dog barks and lunges, I am not going to then let them go to the dog park right then. I'm going to try not to reinforce the reactive behavior by taking them immediately to play with dogs. And instead, so you probably want them to do something, right? Because you would like them to keep, if they love playing with dogs, by all means, they should keep being able to keep having access to play with dogs. But maybe you'll decide instead, I'm going to train something I like walk with me, look at me, and something that isn't lunging and barking. And eventually, I'm going to use that reinforcer, getting to dogs, to reinforce this new behavior that I like better. So, this is how we might use the consequence of dog access if that's the reinforcer for reactive behavior. Try not to give the consequence when the dog is reactive and try to instead attach it to a behavior you like better. Now, motivation wise, this is another place that you can intervene. So, how can we decrease? So, if your dog's motivation for reacting is getting to dogs, is there a way that we could decrease their motivation to get to dogs, which would then decrease, ideally, decrease their motivation to do the reactive behavior in order to get to dogs? How might we do that? Um, if you have the option, giving them a lot more dog play and dog access, if that's safe and accessible to you and to them, can be a way. And we've seen this with some of our clients that can reduce reactive behavior without other training. All right, so that was dogs who like dogs. How about if the reinforcer is escaping or getting away from dogs, or driving dogs away, getting distance from the trigger? So we've got our consequence down here of a dog walking away, moving farther away. And I personally don't recommend trying not to deliver that consequence when they react. If your dog is reacting, I wouldn't, force them to stay close to a trigger until they stopped. Um, just because there's some risk. I mean, it's stressful for you, stressful for your dog, and they may escalate, and there's a potential for someone being injured. Just move away. If they react, you need to go, but try again at a greater distance if you're trying to train. But could you use that consequence in other training? Absolutely. So I like for dogs who we think don't like other dogs, want to get away from them, and that's part of the reinforcer or one of the reinforcers for their reactive behavior. You could choose as an alternative behavior to train something that is getting away. So, oh, you walk nicely on leash, you notice another dog, you haven't barked yet, let's run away from it. And running is also just fun for a lot of dogs. And you can use food here as well to reinforce that behavior. But that's a way that knowing what the consequence is that's reinforcing your dog's reactive behavior might shape what you choose to use as your alternative behavior and as a reinforcer. So moving away instead of them driving the other dog away or, trying to. Another big difference here is the motivation. So how the motivation to bark and lunge, we think, is because they're motivated to get the other dog to move away in this hypothetical case. So how can we decrease that motivation to do the problem behavior? So there are a few things we can do here. One is, I'm not sure this is clear, but this this little circle picture is supposed to be a dog really far away. So one thing is to just not go so close in the first place. If you're already pretty far away, then the dog won't be terribly motivated to make the dog go away. It's already pretty away. So back up, train farther away from the trigger, from other dogs in this case. You can try to pair other dogs with good stuff. So they see another dog and they get something they love to try to change their motivation to get away from dogs. Now, just a side note here. If you're going to do this pairing, don't ignore behavior. It's most efficient to try, if you're using food in your training anyway, you're going to get some pairing. You see a dog, then we run away and you get food. Remember, there is some risk that if you give food to a dog who is already reacting, that you could reinforce that behavior. You won't know until later if you did, but just a caveat that it is a good idea to deliver something like food after they do something you like. But nonetheless, pairing a dog with good stuff may reduce the motivation to react. And then another way to decrease motivation to drive scary stuff away for dogs who are fearful can be anti-anxiety medications. So that would be a consult with a veterinary behaviorist or another vet who's kind of behavior savvy. Okay, so just showing the difference here when the question is, does it matter? For my training, whether my dog is sort of frustrated or afraid, so we think they want to get to the dog, or we think they want the dog to go away. If the trigger is a dog, you can see the differences here are pretty substantial. To change motivation for the dog who wants dogs to go away, you would increase distance, maybe pair dogs with good stuff, maybe look into meds. For a dog who likes other dogs, you would, if you had the option, try to give them more dog access so they're not as motivated to use reactive behaviors to get dog access. And then in terms of what you do with the consequences and choosing alternative behaviors, same thing with a fearful dog, a dog who doesn't like other dogs. You may choose to teach an alternative behavior that helps them get away. And you won't try, at least I wouldn't advise trying to sort of extinguish reactive behavior by just standing there until they stop reacting. It could work, but it could also literally bite you in the ass. Whereas with a dog who likes other dogs, you could decide, I'm not going to let my dog get to other dogs when he's acting this way. Instead, I'm going to train something I like better and reinforce that with this reinforcer he really wants, other dogs. All right. Any questions about this one before I jump to the next question that was submitted? So the question is whether it matters. Why your dog is reacting. And I should also say that it's not that you can't make any progress if you don't know this. You can use really powerful positive reinforcers, or I guess negative if you wanted to, and try to just swamp out or overwhelm other motivations in the moment. And that may work for you. Okay, you don't really like that dog, but I'm going to bury that worry under this pile of meatballs. That can work. But a lot of times it doesn't. And then you need to step back and figure out why it's not working. And also, if your dog is telling you they need something with their behavior, right? They're getting something they need. And it's good to try to figure that out if you can. All right, question is, there's a question that says, my dog walks nicely on leash until she sees another dog. Then she goes berserk and barks, lunges, and pulls to try to get to other dogs. She's strong. She's gotten away a couple times. When she gets to the other dog, she roughs it up but hasn't hurt them yet. After I collect myself and get her, she stops. I now do high-value treats with some success. Okay. So in that case, it's hard to know exactly what's going on. Since she's really strong and has gotten away a couple times, it'd be good to maybe reevaluate the equipment you're using to give you a little bit better hold on her. And you may want to consider muzzle training if she's a big dog and strong and has behaved aggressively toward other dogs when she gets loose. Now, is the motivator for her, is the reinforcer, driving other dogs away? Because that is, often we think a function of aggression. I don't know. It's also possible that whatever roughing up she's doing, she thinks is fun. So that might take a little more digging to figure out what's going on there. But since you've got some risk there with her getting away, her being strong, it sounds like behaving in a not super friendly way to other dogs. Oh yeah, use a martingale collar with a leash. So I would probably up that. I would go with a harness with a front connection. And if you need to, you could train a head halter. That takes a lot of work, and most dogs do not love them. And if you do choose to use a head halter, we always recommend using it in conjunction with a no pull harness. But the martingale collars don't give you very good leverage. Even my senior huskies might be able to pull me over on a martingale collar if they really wanted to. All right, what's our next question here? All right, we got a question about how often to train reactive dogs. And this is a quick answer because really the answer is when you have time. I don't think there's any particularly right or wrong answer. And And for most people, their schedule is the main limiting factor. So don't worry too much. I mean, the more, in theory, the more, sessions you have, the quicker you'll make progress if your training plan is sound. But don't worry about it too much. Just, train when you can. And when you can't, that's okay. Everyone has other things to do in their lives besides dog training. All right. Whoever asked this question, I have to thank because it gave me probably the only excuse I'll ever have to have a picture of a bear in these talks. The question was, how can we teach our dogs the difference between safe and dangerous stuff? And the example was, how can I teach my dog that a bear is dangerous, but leaves rustling in the wind are not dangerous? I really like this question because it lets us step back and think about what we mean by this. What do we mean by teaching a dog something is safe, teaching a dog something is dangerous? For me, the easiest and most practical way to address this is focus on behavior I can see. So when my dog sees a bear or smells a bear, what do I want them to do? And when my dog hears leaves rustling, what do I want them to do? With bears, and I do have some personal experience with this, I would like my dogs to come back to me when they see or smell a bear. At bare minimum, I'd like them to respond to my recall cue. When I call them, I want them to come. And when my dogs hear leaves rustling, I kind of want them to just keep relaxing, lie down, keep lying down, keep doing what they're doing, sleep, whatever. So instead of thinking about how can I teach my dog something is safe or dangerous, I think it's more helpful to think, what do I need to train my dog to do around dangerous stuff versus around stuff that's not dangerous? Now, with things that are really dangerous, you may decide that training isn't the way to go. It might be better to just keep them on leash if you're in an area with a lot of dangerous wildlife. May also be legally required for that matter. But just a reminder that training in general, training can change the likelihood of different behaviors, but you can never guarantee 100%. If a dog can do what, they're loose and they can make their own choices, there's never 100% guarantee that they will make the choice you want them to make. So if the cost of not coming to you when you call them is they get killed, then keep them on leash. So that's just my PSA for stuff around wildlife. I do let my dogs, loose in the woods, and their recall is pretty good. I do not let them off leash when we're close to highways because the cost is too high if they go a little too far for me and don't respond or I don't notice fast enough. All right, any questions on this safe versus dangerous and teaching our dogs different things in safe versus dangerous situations? Okay. All right, next question was, how can you fix it if your dog grabs the treat and then goes right back to reacting or reacts immediately? And this was kind of in the context of one of our group members who said she was trying to teach a more extended stay around triggers, like a settle or something. And once she got to longer stays, the dog would grab the treat, but then I guess bark or do whatever reactive behaviors they do. So there are a couple answers to this question. We covered, I think we covered some of this in a somewhat recent talk. I'll have to, if you search the blog, I think there's something about, takes treats but still reacts, a blog about that with a video. But if your dog does this, grabs treats and then immediately reacts, that's a possible sign that they are pretty motivated to get the trigger to do whatever it is their reactive behavior has achieved for them in the past, go away or get closer. So that probably means your training scenario is a bit too difficult. So the first thing I would do was back up. Just work a little bit farther away from the triggers or with a lower intensity version so that your dog isn't quite so motivated to do their reactive behavior. The other thing to do, and this is sort of makes more sense in the context of talking about building a longer settle or stay, um, or really anything where you're trying to spread out your reinforcements a little bit, would be to mix up the time where you're giving the treats. So, for instance, say you're trying to teach your dog to settle on a mat with or without triggers, doesn't matter. At some point, if you go too long and it's all, and say it's for your dog, it may be 10 seconds, it may be 30 seconds, but at some length of time, doing that behavior is going to become not worth it for a single treat. So, a good way to get around this is to mix it up a little. Say, okay, well, I'm trying to get my dog up to 15 seconds right now. So, one out of every 5 or 10 reps, I'm going to wait 15 seconds to give them a treat. But all the other reps, I'm going to make a little bit easier. So, oh, feed you after 15 seconds. Oh, you just stayed for 3 seconds, another treat. 5 seconds, another treat. 10 seconds, a treat. 1 second, a treat. So that your dog doesn't know that it's always going to be getting harder, always going to be getting longer, if that makes sense. If your dog knows that they've learned that a treat only comes every 15 or 20 or 30 seconds, then right after they get a treat, they're at their lowest sort of motivation to do that behavior because it's going to be a while before they can get another treat. That's a pretty well-known pattern of behavior when you have really sort of regular reinforcement like that. So give that a try if you're having trouble building duration of a behavior. Just mix it up, bounce around, mostly have easy reps, intersperse with just, sprinkle a few difficult ones in there, but don't just keep making it steadily more difficult all the time. All right, we have a question. Oh, I think I can make this go on the screen. Uh-oh. I feel like that's missing. I'm missing part of this answer or this question. Ashley, is there a first part of your comment? Because I can't find it here. I think there might have been something. If your dog isn't interested in treats and trigger situation, well, I'll just put this here and do my best. If your dog isn't interested in treats, one, go check out our blog and video from just a few weeks ago on my dog. It's called, I think, My Dog Isn't Food Motivated. We talk specifically about this issue. But if your dog isn't interested in treats and food at all, then there are other reinforcers that are higher priority to them right now. And a lot of times, your best bet, if you want to use food to train, is to decrease those other motivations. So, what that means, practically speaking, is if you're really close to a trigger and your dog can't think about food at all, move farther away and try again and see, okay, now can they be motivated to eat? The other thing you can do is try to figure out what they want right now and use that reinforcer. So maybe they don't want to take food, but they really want to go say hi to that dog. Okay, well, maybe you can use running over to say hi to that dog if it's safe and you know that dog is dog friendly and that other dog's mom or dad is okay with it. You could ask your dog to do something that isn't reacting and then run over to say hi to the other dog as the reward. Or run away if they would like to run away. Okay. All right. Any questions about sort of bouncing around like that with your criteria when you're training? I do it much more often now than I used to. And there is good evidence that can give you some better and faster progress if you intersperse lots of easy trials with the harder stuff that you're working toward. All right. Another question, unpredictable triggers. So what should you do if your dog, you don't know what your dog's going to react to, like they react to some dogs and not others, or some visitors and not others? How do you address this problem? There are two things to do here that I would recommend. One thing is just treat everything that could be a trigger like it's going to be a trigger. So for instance, if your dog reacts to some dogs, but not all, but you don't know which ones they're going to react to, just do your, whatever it is you're trying to train your dog to do, cue or not, whatever you're doing with the alternative behavior, try to get that around all dogs. I mean, what might happen is that your dog does the thing you want them to do around dogs they wouldn't have reacted to anyway. And there's no harm in that. So that's the first thing, is just treat everything that could be a trigger like it's going to be. Better than having to react yourself and try to decide how you're going to do damage control once the reaction has already started. The other thing is start taking detailed notes and see if you can't narrow it down a little bit. A lot of times when we're trying to identify triggers, we focus exclusively on characteristics of the trigger itself. So, big dogs versus small dogs, dark colored dogs versus lighter colored dogs, men versus women if they're reactive to people, or kids versus adults, that kind of thing. It's also worth noting the behavior of the trigger. Is the dog or person looking at your dog versus not? Are they moving versus not moving? Moving toward them versus moving away? And another one, which I think this person who asked this question mentioned, which can be a big one, is the surprise factor. Has it been quiet with no triggers around for a while and all of a sudden a dog or a person appears? That can be much harder than somebody who's been around in plain sight for a while for the dog. So make notes of anything you notice, and that can include, like I said, things like characteristics of the trigger, but also their behavior and other things going on in the environment, including whether or not it was a sudden, surprise, sudden appearance of a trigger, and see if you can't work out with a little more precision what you need to train around. That will help. All right. Any questions about that? Unpredictable triggers. This is actually a question we get fairly often. Let's see. All right, folks. I am going to put up. I have to move over so I'm in the screen. Put up the link to the online course that we have open just this week, and it'll be closed again. That's our reactive dog survival guide online course. That's the link there. If you decide to enroll, you can read about it on that page. I can be here for a few more minutes if there are more questions. Otherwise, I will let you all return to your Mondays. Sometimes I don't want to return to my Monday, but oh, my pleasure. I love hearing everyone's questions and seeing sort of, what you're dealing with, what's going well, what's still causing you trouble. That tells us what we can provide that'll help you more. If you're not already in the Facebook group, that's a nice place to be to get answers to your questions as well. So check that out. It's linked to our business Facebook page if you're on Facebook. And you can submit questions. Actually, there's a form there inside our group where you could submit questions for future Facebook lives like this one I'm doing, so that I can answer your questions there. All right, everyone. I hope that was helpful. I hope to see some of you in the course. It's a lot of fun, I think. I love working with people in the course, and gives you some structure in your training, which can be really helpful as well. All right. Happy Monday, everybody. I will see you. Not next week is a holiday here in the US, so I'm going to take that day off. But I'll be back with a regular Monday broadcast in 2 weeks. All right. Bye, everyone. Talk to you later.